look at today is various kinds of conclusions, and you can see which of these is going to work best for your people. Okay, so in terms of what a conclusion can do, it can summarize your main points. It can add a finishing touch to your argument. It can put your discussion in a broader context, or it can point toward further research. So these are all different possibilities. The first one option is to state the subject's significance. So what you're doing is after you've talked about your whole paper, you put it in some bigger context. Summarize all the specific topics you've covered, and then say why they matter. Can you go ahead, Becca, and read this?
The success of hybrid corn has also stimulated the breeding of other crops, such as sorghum hybrids, a major feed grain crop in arid parts of the world. Today, virtually all corn produced in the developed countries is from hybrid seed. From those blue bloods of the plant kingdom has come a model for feeding the world.
Okay, so you've written a paper about hybrid seeds, and you might say, well, okay, how can I make this seed more important, right? So put it in context. What those seeds are going to do is they're going to feed the world, and that, in fact, is what corn does. It's a huge contributor to global nutrition, right? And so that's where you're going to make the broader point. Second thing you can do is call for further research. Most of you are not likely to use this kind of ending unless you have an FYE or you've done a research project. It's possible you might wrap up with something like this. But it is a very common science and social science type conclusion where after you've reviewed what's presented, you talk about what has to come next. And you'll see in this case, the paper discusses in the last paragraph what it is that their study found out, and then what it did not find out, what the research has not made clear, and further research is needed. So the last sentence is basically saying something that isn't even in the paper, right? But it's really helpful because it puts the whole paper into a certain context. Third thing you can do is offer a solution or recommendation, particularly if you're reviewing a problem or a controversy, you could offer some type of solution. So in this case, this paragraph is about the problem in college sports where it's being commercialized. And the solution that this author comes up with is that the athletes should be getting paid in addition to the leagues and so on. Right? So therefore, the college athlete will get his or her fair share of the revenue. Fourth thing you can do is use an anecdote, right? So tell a brief story. And the whole point here is not to belabor the point, or to then go ahead and interpret your story. Just throw it out there and then you'll be done. And the reader has already been set up to understand it, and it's designed to provoke interest. A lot of you are familiar with incorporating quotes for intros. I'm not sure how many of you did it for your conclusions. A couple people, right? Okay, did it, and I think you did it quite successfully. What it should be doing is it should fit with your thesis, and it should be appropriate to the tone of your paper, and the reader should basically be ready for it. So here's an example. Hannah, can you go ahead and read that?
Studies on the influence of popular culture suggest that cruel humor serves as more than a release in modern society. The ubiquitous media pick up our baser feature, exaggerate it to entertain, and by spinning it back at us, encourage us to push the boundaries even further. We might do well to consider the advice of Roman statesman and orator Cicero, who wrote at the peak of the Roman Empire. If we are forced at every hour to watch or listen to horrible events, this constant stream of ghastly impressions will deprive even the most delicate among us all of respect for humanity.
So you got a paper here about popular culture and the coarsening of popular culture, right? And that's what the paper's been about, is the present day. But in trying to put it into a context, they've gone ahead and made this comparison with Cicero, what was going on in the Roman Empire, because there was a lot of concern that the gladiator games and so on were affecting Roman society and culture. So here's this very forceful analogy that he's drawing, right, between, that the author's drawing, between the Roman times and today. And the hope is that we're now prepared for this quote and can make some comparisons to our own time inside the quote. Okay, another thing you can do is ask a question. And of course, this is going to function differently than a question you ask at the beginning of your paper. So it should be answered by the paper if it's in the intro, and if you're asking it at the very end of your paper, it's going to leave things unresolved. I'd like to just go back for 1 minute and give you the example here. Say, for example, you had this example of commercialism in sports. At the very end, you could end in a question by saying something like, wouldn't it be fair to the athletes to offer them the same kind of rewards that the coaches and leagues are receiving? Right? So you're ending with a question. You haven't actually answered it, but it's implied that that's what you mean. Okay. You can also speculate. This is a specific type of question that asks what might happen. And so at the very end, you can put what might happen if we institute this policy, for example. You can go ahead and summarize. This is the most direct and safest conclusion, and this is one that all of you are familiar with, where you restate the thesis of your paper, and you also summarize some of the major steps that you took in arriving there. You can still do this and add onto it, onto your summary, a quote from one of your sources.